Hi guys, so I've recently finally read the two prequels to the Hunger Games series, and I thought this would be a great opportunity now to go back and reread the original trilogy and reflect on it. So that's what I'm doing, starting with book 1 in this video, The Hunger Games. But before we get into it, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts down in the comments below. So the first book, The Hunger Games, has always been my favorite book in the trilogy, and I think as it still remains the same after rereading the first book now, because I think that just this book does so many things so well in just introducing us to this unique world that Suzanne Collins created out of nothing basically here. It goes very well about introducing us to what the world is like, while, you know, in the beginning we follow Katniss and what a day hunting in the forest looks like for her, and then preparing for the reaping basically, and then, you know, slowly introducing the characters, slowly introducing the background, while at the same time building up a lot of, you know, action, and, you know, we're just right getting into these Hunger Games. And that's where I think like these flashbacks that is done in this book works very well. Like we are going straight into the actions, but through flashbacks from you know, Katniss' history and the history between her and Peeta basically, we learn more about the background of both Katniss, Peeta, and all these kind of relationship and the world that we are experiencing the story within. So I'm not really going into, you know, the plot of the story. I believe that everybody watching this video by now has read The Hunger Games, so I'm just going to share my thoughts after rereading the first book in the trilogy, and some things that surprised me. So for example, there's some things that I remembered very different, and I think that also maybe comes from the fact that when I read a book and also see the movie and then maybe listen to the audiobook, there's like those stories kind of melt together, and then sometimes I don't really remember what happened where, which is kind of a pity. So I would usually like to remember what like the canon version of the story of the book is, but it's more often very difficult to kind of differentiate, okay, what is book and what is movie. So there's some things that surprised me in here, but yeah, let's just go into the points that I wrote down after reading the book, and then, you know, we'll see what you guys think about it. So what I wrote here, what is amazingly done in the beginning is that it immediately makes us care about Prim. So the book and the story starts off by Katniss, you know, talking about Prim and helping her getting dressed, and, you know, kind of caring for her, and seeing how kind of helpless and young and much support that Prim needs from Katniss at that time, when she's still young and not as capable as she is in later books. So right from the beginning, it makes us deeply care about Prim, and I believe when we first read the story, it is actually a big surprise that Prim would be reaped first. So I think that's very well done. At the same time, what I absolutely love is that Peeta only gets introduced when his mane is drawn at the reaping, because we don't hear anything about Peeta before, so we might think at the reaping that obviously we got introduced to this character Gale, so obviously he's going to be like the male lead, and he's gonna be selected as a tribute, and then there's just this unknown character at that point, Peeta, that is being selected, and we don't know anything about him, but she really does very well in then introducing us to Peeta, the boy, and his background, while at the same time moving the story along, which I think is perfectly done here. In general, like the introduction of the characters in this book is done so much better than in any of the other books, especially, you know, after reading the two prequels. In those two books, especially in the ballad, it's just like a list of people that is being read down, and these are the tributes basically, and then we don't really get to know any of them, and it's very difficult to distinct these characters. But here they are getting introduced very successfully, very slow, in the sense that even when the game starts, we still, haven't heard a lot of these names. So they are only being mentioned like, oh, maybe, oh, this is the boy from District Number 9. And then maybe later on, she introduces a character like when Katniss is hiding up in the tree. Oh, this is Clove, for example, because Kato is shouting her name, and that's how we first hear her name, and then we learn more about how she is, how her character is. So I think the development of the characters and the introduction of the different characters makes them much more memorable than what she's able to do with any of the other books, which is why I probably, even after reading, all these books, I most clearly remember all of the characters' names from the first book, because they just introduced so well, and it's not just a list of 40 people being read down, basically. What I else wrote down here, in general, absolutely amazing world building. It's great what Susan Collins came up here with the distribution of individual industries and tasks towards these districts, and how the capital is able, by basically cutting off transportation, cutting off information, transmission of information between the districts and people, by isolating them, is able to hold control over them. And I think it's a wonderful world building here. The only thing that I have to criticize here, as I did before, I'm sorry, but the size of the world just does not make any sense. How come District 12 is only, everything is within walking distance to the central square, basically, and it just can't be that small if we're talking about this huge world here. It's far, everything is just far too small here. That's kind of my main issue with the whole world and the world building, basically. But other than that, I think it's done very well. What I also like is like the arena in the first games. It's not too many things, too technical, too over the top, because I thought like in the second games, that in the second book, Catching Fire, there's just too many things going on with this whole like clockwork system, and tons of different things happening all over the arena. It kind of felt like at that point, Susan Collins felt forced to make it, as impressive as possible for the movie adaptation. And I much more like this kind of simple arena that we find ourselves here in the first book. What I also very much enjoy here, especially after just reading Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I like that the perspective is from somebody within the game, so from Katniss. I like that we learn everything from her point of view, and it even I even though we don't get a point of view from Peter, we get to know him very well. We know exactly what he's feeling, how he is behaving. So I think it's told very well from this Katniss point of view perspective, and it's just a very emotional book. It's even though I know the story, I get sad every time I read or listen to it. Especially the point that always gets me is like in the beginning, when Katniss promises to Prim at their goodbye. She's not promising to win, but she's promising to try, which I don't know, it just feels so sad. It's like she knows she can't promise to win, but she does the next best thing, I guess. And she's just such a strong character, which I've always admired about Katniss. There is one thing I would critique a little bit, is once we get to the games, I would have hoped them doing less of the flashbacks, because it felt sometimes quite interruptive to the story and to the action in the story, that there's not suddenly another flashback, from Katniss and Peter's background. I would have liked if she had, finished all these flashbacks before we enter the arena, basically. And another thing that I did not really like about it, and I remembered very differently, I thought that Peter was a lot more like stronger in the first book, but and I felt, because one of my critique has always been in the second and third book, he felt extremely helpless, like close to being useless. And I always liked Peter, so I always felt that he's been done very poorly in the second and third book. Because I'm not saying that, you know, every guy needs to be a strong character, but I think that he was just so useless in the second and the third book. It just felt so pitiful, and I found myself not liking the character anymore after that. But in the first book, I always loved him. I loved how smart and witty he is about things, and it's also nice that they are saying that he's a strong guy. But like, once we get to like that cave, and you know, with him walking in the woods, I understand that he's from the merchant part of town, but still, he did not grow up in like a very well developed environment, even though he is from the merchant section. So he would still have some, you know, basic skills on how to survive, I would say, and some street smarts. And here it's just, and it surprised me because I thought it was different, but already from, you know, the second part of the book here, he feels very helpless, and he can't do anything without Katniss. The only thing he manages to do in the end, and I also forgot about that, is basically draw like a target for Katniss on with blood on his hand, on Cato's hand. But other than that, he's not really helpful anymore, after being found by Katniss. I found that very disappointing. I didn't remember it in that way at all. And then the other thing that really got me at the end was that I really thought that Peter was aware that Katniss is just doing everything, you know, for the audience, and mainly pretending to be in love with him. Even though she already has some conflicting emotions, okay, but mainly she is pretending for her own survival, and I thought Peter was aware of it. But here it's made very clear in the end, when they're on the train and going back, is that Peter is surprised and even gets, you know, upset when he learns that it was all for show. I thought he was more emotionally mature and more smart, that he would know what is going on. And I don't know, I remembered that he knew what was going on, but it seems that he didn't actually know what was going on, and he only realized that on the way back. So I'm very curious to see how that develops in the beginning of the second book, Catching Fire, when I'm doing my reread on that. But it was interesting to see after so many years. I don't even remember when was the last time that I read this book, but it's interesting to see how, you know, your memory changes on how you remember what a book and what the storyline was like. So I was quite surprised with a few of these things happening in the book. But either way, I still thought it's a very strong book. It's a very strong entry into this series. I love the world that she's built. It's an amazing storyline. Character world building is absolutely great. So from me, you know, if I go into a rating here, this is absolutely I would say 4 out of 5 stars, 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really love this book, but it's not, you know, the top. But probably there's also a lot of nostalgia in that rating because I remember it from, you know, growing up. So yeah, that's basically my opinion on The Hunger Games Book 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever done a reread of this series after many years, and also found that you remembered some things quite differently from what they actually are in the book? Any things that, you know, you would like to mention, or you would like me to keep in mind while reading the second and third book in the series? Yeah, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.